Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. The Bank of Canada did what was widely expected by cutting the key interest rate by 25 basis points just last week. We're going to briefly talk about what this means for the real estate market, but we're also going to talk about multiplex legislation that was just launched across the Lower Mainland and how that's going to affect the various cities when it comes to housing. Real quick, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you, or you just wanted to chat about your real estate situation with me, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future weekly video. All right, so I want to hop right into it. Bank of Canada cuts its key rate as we all expected by 25 basis points. It now sits at 4.50%. Want to talk very quickly about what this means for you if you are a variable rate holder. Now, if you have an adjustable payment, for example, Scotiabank offers this product, then you will see a decrease in your payment of about $15 for every $100,000 owed per month, and that's based on a 25-year amortization. Now, some variable products, they have a fixed payment. So in that circumstance, you're not going to see your payment decrease, but you'll have more of your money going towards the principal of the loan. So that's positive news for you. If you are on a fixed rate, no change for you. If you are someone who's a new buyer looking at getting in the market, how might this affect you? The new fixed rate, so if you're to initiate a new mortgage, very often these rate changes, especially when they're widely expected, very often they're already priced in to the rates. I do think, speaking with mortgage brokers, that we will continue to see rates come down a little bit. So this is positive news in that sense as well. And if you're going to be coming up for renewal as well, which a lot of mortgage holders are going to this year and next year, this bodes well for you as well. I want to talk about a couple of items that the Bank of Canada said when they dropped their key rate yet again. The first one, they were specifically asked about housing and what they expect this is going to do for the housing market, and are they concerned that housing prices are going to start climbing again? And they quite interestingly said that, you know, nothing that they can do with the Bank of Canada interest rate is going to affect the housing market and housing prices. And they basically came out and said that, you know, housing in our country is such a multifaceted issue to deal with when it comes to housing supply, when it comes to legislation, when it comes to construction costs, when it comes to, do we have the labor to build? And yes, interest rates are a portion in there, but the message was, you know, we are not going to adjust our rate based on what we see in the housing market. We can't do that. And it almost came out as saying, you know, we understand that in cutting the rates, we understand that home prices may rise, but that's not a focus for us. You know, we have to keep in mind that their whole focus is to keep inflation at the 2% target is where they're trying to get it to. But between that 1% to 3% range is where they like to be. So they're trying to get it to 2%. They understand that by cutting rates, historically that has shown that home prices rise. You know, if we look at where home prices are, even amidst the rate hiking cycle we just came out of, we still saw year over year gains. So it didn't matter what happened with the interest rate. The reality is, you know, for a large period of time there, less people decided to sell. There wasn't as much motivated to sell and move into other properties and into higher rates. All of these sort of moving components in terms of, you know, being able to restrict supply. And in the last, let's say 8-9 months, we've actually seen supply increase, and yet prices have held fairly steady. You know, drops in the condo segment for sure, month over month, but year over year still, you know, up a little bit. Some gains in the detached market. So, you know, a lot of sellers that are just not having their backs against the wall. And, you know, interestingly enough, I was having an email conversation with reporter at the Globe and Mail, and we were going back and forth about this particular topic, about how many mortgages are up for renewal this year and next year based on people that purchased during pandemic times. And she was saying how she's concerned about what might come from that. And I think ultimately another thing that was mentioned during this press conference was that discretionary spending has dropped significantly. Retail spending has come down in Canada as well. And the reason I bring this up is as homeowners go for mortgage approvals, the reality is, mortgage renewals, the reality is the banks are going to do what they can to help decrease the sticker or the price shock from these increase in rates, whether that's extended amortizations. The federal government came out with their, I believe they called it a mortgage charter several months ago, encouraging, it's not legislation, but encouraging banks to, make it easy on homeowners by extending amortizations, what they need to do. But what we need to keep in mind is as these renewals come up, yes, it's going to be a struggle for homeowners, but shelter, home costs are going to take precedence, right? Food and shelter are going to take priority. And what that means is people are going to be cutting back in other areas, as we've already seen in the data. That's just going to now intensify. And so we have an economy that has struggled, that has stalled. Some would say we're in a recession. It's not brighter times ahead when it comes to keeping the machine running in this country from a spending perspective, right? So discretionary spending is going to come down even further. Unemployment is rising. We're in the 6th percentile right now, trending to go towards 7%. So all of this to say, to circle back to the interest rate decision, the Bank of Canada said if we continue to see the data as we have been seeing it, with inflation coming in line, also looking at GDP, unemployment rate, we expect future cuts. All right, I want to switch gears a bit now and talk about Bill 44 multiplex zoning, which was launched by the provincial government across municipalities across BC. And basically how it worked is they were giving the cities up until June 30th to amend their bylaws to allow for what they call small scale multi-unit housing. And so this would be anywhere from 3+ units on a single family lot, depending on various things, size of lot, proximity to transit. Now, how that legislation worked is they created the framework provincially, yet they left power in the hands of the municipalities in terms of what we call FSR, which is how much square footage you can build on a lot. They left that power in the hands of the municipalities. They gave them about 6 or 7 months, all of this year up until June 30th, to amend their bylaws and come up with their own policy to launch as of June 30th with this larger framework. And so I've had a lot of questions asking me, what's happening with multiplexes? Has it been rolled out across all municipalities? Is it uniform amongst the different municipalities? Where are we at? And what we've learned is that, and we kind of already knew this, but what we've learned is that some municipalities, some cities are much more pro-development, pro-densification than others. And now we've seen that play out in terms of the individual bylaws from the cities. So for example, if we were to say the front runners for allowing multiplexes and being very open book about that procedure for developers, Vancouver for sure, because Vancouver had already launched their multiplex policy before the provincial government got involved. But you have Vancouver at the top, Burnaby is at the top of that list in terms of providing for different housing options under this multi-unit umbrella. Those could be row home style, fourplex, multiplex, being a lot more open with that development. And then you have some cities, some municipalities, which just did not want to roll it out and have not even rolled it out. For example, West Vancouver. And one of the questions, I've been chatting with people about this, one of the questions that comes to me is, how are they able to do this? This is a provincial mandate. This is legislation. I thought everyone had to do this by June 30th. And it's funny. I shouldn't say funny. It's interesting because everything is a political play, no matter where you look. So you have a city like West Vancouver and they say, we're not into it. Multiplex, we're not doing it. We're not going to adjust our bylaws. We're just not going to do it. And this may not surprise a lot of people. West Vancouver, not exactly very pro-densification. historically over the last several decades, if you will. And so they put their hands up and they say, this is not something we're going to do. And basically, it's all a ploy in terms of holding on to that support from constituents. So if you're on city council and you know that 80-90% of your constituents, the people that put you in office, the people you're going to rely on to keep you in office, do not want this change to occur, you are going to play a game of chicken with the province. So you very well might say, I'm not going to do this. And you may turn to the province and say, look, if this is something you want us to do, you are going to have to strong arm us. You're going to have to take the risk that you're going to lose the votes from our city here, rather than ourselves at the municipal government level, than us losing the votes for something we don't want to do. And you have to keep in mind, most cities were not very excited about the provincial government strong-arming them into a multiplex policy, and at the same time, in effect, saying that what the cities have been doing has been ineffective. And so you have this scenario now where certain cities are just putting their hands up and saying, no, we're not going to do it. If you want to strong arm us to do it, provincial government, you can do it. You count on these votes as well. And so we're seeing a lot of these little battles, if you will, take place. We're seeing some cities become, more restrictive with that FSR. So playing that sort of middle game where it's like, okay, yeah, we will, play by the rules. We'll do what you're telling us to do. But, we can tighten up that FSR. We can make it so developers can't build as much floor space, and that directly impacts the revenue from the project. So a developer might look at it and say, this is not feasible. This is not something I'm going to do. So what we've learned from the rollout so far there are a few cities that are at the top of the list that are, pro-densification, pro-development. And I think a lot of the development is going to shift in that area for these multiplexes and specific types of sites, that may allow for more units, for instance. At the same time, the provincial government launched I believe it was Bill 47, transit-oriented development. And now this was regulating that FSR that we just talked about and building minimum building story heights surrounding SkyTrains and surrounding bus exchanges. And so, for example, if you are within 200 meters of a SkyTrain station, the minimum story height that cities would have to allow are 20 stories plus. Now, within that zoning or that policy change, there's flexibility given to the cities in terms of different types of things. So for example, if someone were to build, a rental tower, what percentage of those would have to be below market rental, right? And if a city really wanted to kill development, they could make that threshold so high, they could make it above the 20% that you generally see and make it so it's not feasible. I want to jump, talking about transit-oriented development, I want to jump back over to Burnaby, because Burnaby, very pro-development on the multiplex side of things. And in fact, over the years, very pro-development in terms of high-rise towers and high density in certain pockets around SkyTrain. When it comes to the transit-oriented development policy, Burnaby said, no, we're not going to do this. We either A, need more time, or we're not going to do it. And so again, this was a mandated policy that was supposed to be launched June 30th, and they're not doing it. And it's interesting because when you look at Burnaby, for example, I think the way they are looking at it is a couple ways. Number one, they have, in North Burnaby, they have multiple SkyTrain stops along Lougheed Highway. Number two, they already, have adopted a high density policy surrounding these areas. And how it works with the transit-oriented development is it's a set of circles. So you'll have a circle that's 0 to 200 meters surrounding the SkyTrain, then 200 to 400, and then 400 to 800. And when you map these out across Burnaby with those multiple SkyTrain stations, this would basically impact that whole North Burnaby section and rezone that to high density. Now, if you are a city leader in Burnaby and you want to maintain, some different characteristics of housing. You don't want to blanket everything with high density. You want some character in there. You want some neighborhoods that are, small scale multi-unit, for example. When you have all of these SkyTrain stations and you're being mandated to allow for these story heights, you probably feel like you're doing too much and you've already done what you need to do. And so it's really interesting, these overlapping policies. If we look at transit-oriented development in Vancouver, there are some restrictive elements within the zoning when it comes to building for strata or for sale. For example, there's money you have to give back towards the city, towards supportive housing type of development. So there's all of these little nuances that cities are allowed to do. So when it comes to multiplexes, transit-oriented development, extremely nuanced by the cities. For example, a fourplex in one city may be viewed as 4 separate strata title properties, meaning you could sell off 4 units. A fourplex in another city is being viewed as 2 units with basement suites. And the basement suites, you couldn't sell them off. So it's almost like having duplexes with 2 units below it. So again, very city dependent. Jumping back to Burnaby, and I just read an article the other day, which I found pretty interesting. One of the largest developers, longstanding developers in the city, writes a letter to Burnaby saying, we were looking at 2 large purpose-built rental sites in your city, but just based on all of the development cost charges and the policies and the procedures, it made these unbuildable. And in fact, they had to pass on these sites which they were looking to purchase, one of which was a 3-acre site along Royal Oak. And this, again, is one of the most prominent developers out there. And they cited a couple things when it comes to purpose-built rentals. Number one is the way the development cost charges work now, and I've talked about this on my channel, is prior to all of this rezoning change by the provincial government, rezoning was a time period where the municipalities would collect money from the developers as part of the rezoning process. And so when you do this mass rezoning, it takes away the city's ability to collect revenue from the developer. They need to find that revenue in another way. We have what we call ACCs, amenity contributions, and we have DCCs, development cost charges. And so the way that these charges work now, and these were increased right across Metro Vancouver, is they've added so much cost to an individual unit that it's not feasible for a lot of these developers to build out in our environment of higher interest rates. Secondly, what this letter was saying to the city, again from this developer, was that because we have to carry 20% of these units, these rental housing units, below the CMHC median rental threshold, for Burnaby, it actually makes those units 60% below market. So you're actually charging so much less than market. Each of those units is a significant loss to the developer. And with our rent control policies here, they'll never catch up. And these are not my words. This is from the developer. I've talked about this same exact thing on this channel. But coming out and saying, look, we had the opportunity, we were looking at building new rental housing in this city, and I'm not singling out, I don't want to single out Burnaby here. This is an issue across Metro Vancouver in terms of feasibility, not only of strata projects, but of purpose-built rentals. But we had an opportunity to do this, and we just can't do this. And so when we look at it from a supply perspective, we look at it from all of the different, entities and governments that are trying to make sure that we have enough supply across Canada and then provincially. When we look at, taxation measures, this is why when I hear from the federal government or rumblings that they are looking at taxing principal residences, it's not so much the issue that, they're coming for our provincial residences for tax revenue. It's not so much that for me. It's you haven't been able to show me or show us that you've been able to do the right things with the money to find the solutions. So it's one thing to come to, uncharted territory when it comes to taxation, when we've already been, taxed up the yin yang. That's one thing. But secondly, are you going to do the right thing with the money? And the third thing is that actually going to result in more housing units at the ground level, considering all of the things I talked about with the labor issues, with the higher construction costs, with the higher interest rates, with municipalities being restrictive about FSR? Will it ever be aligned that that money that you take from us is actually going to mean more housing units. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes the video and it sends it out to more people so they can also learn from it. And if you enjoy weekly Vancouver real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's video. And lastly, again, if you're in the Vancouver area or the Fraser Valley, you want to chat with me about your real estate situation, book me for a free call, or you can just send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email. All my contact info is in the description box below. But I want to thank you again for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.